Hello everyone, welcome back to the Red YouTube channel and to yet another episode of the Solitary series with me, Jonathan Petts. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at camera protocols and ways that we can be interfacing and working with our DSMC2 and Ranger cameras either through wireless connectivity or through physical bits of hardware that third-party approved manufacturers have been producing for these bits of kit to make them really flexible and really dependable and basically just a real joy to work with on set. And one of the first things that I want to touch on is initially just wireless follow focus. You know, there's a multitude of reasons, not just for wireless follow focus, but in general for having a remote connection to the camera. If we're going into an underwater rig and we forget, oh no, I forgot to take it out of widescreen mode, I meant to be in full frame mode. You know, once you've spent ages rigging it inside this bubble of underwater housing, same goes if you're doing it on a gimbal, or maybe if your Steadicam operator is balancing the head and it's like, oh no, I forgot to put it in high speed mode. So there's loads of reasons why I want to be able to interact and work with the camera. And one of the things that I want to touch on first with wireless follow focus is actually the triggers that are built into different modules. Now, one of the things that when I joined Red, so I've almost been here for about a year now, I found that there was not a lot of confusion, but not a lot of people knew that basically, I'll dive into it now by going to my home screen here, that there are different triggers depending on the module that you have attached to your DSMC or DSMC2 product. And that trigger dictates the cable that you ultimately need to be triggering that, because a lot of people were either getting units from rental houses that had different sets of modules and all these kind of things and didn't necessarily have the right cables. So I'm just going to start with that now and kind of run through that setup process. So as we can see here, we have a Schmitt trigger and a momentary ground trigger. Now, a Schmitt trigger, which is built into the DSMC2 base expander and Epic and Scarlett cameras. So just for those of you to have a little bit of knowledge there, the base expander is the module that doesn't have the V-lock built into it. It's just got a bare plate and allows you to add modules onto the back of that. And what the Schmitt trigger is doing is there's basically two thresholds for power that then initiate a trigger. So when you press, so there's a constant feed basically going through that line, and then when a certain threshold of power is reached, recording is started, it will drop down again, and when you do it again, it will then stop recording. How that differs to a momentary ground system is it's kind of in the name, momentary ground. It's there for a moment. So when you press record, a little voltage is sent through and then the action is started. And what that means is we need to choose a different set of cables for that. Now, just to kind of touch on the momentary ground trigger here for the moment, if you're on a Ranger camera, if you've got a production module, which I've got just to my right here, if you've got the Jetpack or the V-lock IO expander, so that's the one that has the built-in V-lock IO plate, so that's this one here, you've got a momentary ground system, and that's pretty much the industry standard at this point, so that's why I've moved over towards it. So let's start looking at some of these manufacturers that make cables to allow you to run, stop, run control through this system. So we're going to look at C-Motion first and kind of go through many of the main players and kind of just make it clear, hey, this is what we need to get going. So C-Motion make it very clear. We've got the Red 1 cable, we've got Epic interface cables, and then the Red weapon run cable. So in this instance, Epic is going to be alluding to the Schmitt trigger, and weapon is going to be alluding towards the momentary ground trigger. And what's also super cool with C-Motion, they just released through their hand units, because they're running through the control port, you can actually control settings through the C-Motion hand unit. So that's super, super cool. Just going to quickly breeze through the rest of these ones. So if you've got the Teradek, which is what I'm going to be showing you today, and some really cool things with the Teradek RT-ACI, because they've basically built in a wireless follow focus into a unit that you can control settings from. Really, really neat. So we'll dive into that in a moment. Going over to Preston, there's a couple of different ways we can set up and configure a Preston. I'm going to show the actual setup process in camera in a moment. But fundamentally, we're looking at the DSMC2 for the control port or DSMC1 from production wiring here. But what's really cool about the Ranger and the production module is that they've got two 3-pin 24-volt run stops on the front. So on the production module here and on the front of the Ranger, they're in there as standard. And that's really cool because then you can negate the need to go through the control port, which, as we'll see later on, opens up that control port for other accessories that can utilize that. Tilter, again, DSMC1 and DSMC2, very close to the cable you need. And just to round it off, with the WCU4 and the ARRI side of things, they make it very clear when it's for the red weapon, and also to make it clear, hey, this is the cable that's not designed for DSMC2 base expander or the EPIC. And for those of you that are running the C-Force mini motors, there's a slightly different configuration there where you need this cable to get power and control through the system. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump over to my camera that I've got here. I'm just going to close out that window so I free up a bit of RAM. There we go. And I'm just going to run you through just to reiterate how do we get a wireless follow focus set up when we're running through the control port. And it's super, super easy. And then we'll start getting into the fun stuff that I've got here on my right. So we're coming in, we're going to settings, setup, communication, and very simply just by going into serial and setting RCP, that's going to allow us all the functionality for run stop and also for these accessories that we're about to dive into. So let's go over. I'm going to get rid of me so we can get a nice full screen so everyone can see what's going on here, and we'll start discussing about the benefits of some of these systems. So I've rigged up a DSMC2 camera here. We've got the MDR ACI. We've also got the Teradek Bolt DSMC, which is built in. And this is actually a really cool bit of kit because it's interfacing directly with the camera. It's taking a feed of image, it's taking one of the image feeds, and it's also taking power. Because typically when working with Teradeks or wireless follow focus systems, we've actually got to rig them on a Noga arm, and they've taking the camera off balance, and the Noga arms always go a little bit floppy. So by having it integrated, we keep our system really nice and flush and cable free, because that's what's really nice about the modularity of the DSMC2 system. We can then further reduce our cables by using a direct mount touchscreen as well. But the real thing we want to look at here is the MDR ACI. Now, this is a really cool bit of kit. Because Red has an open RCP SDK protocol, developers can come in and provide solutions that do not currently exist through first party. Now, some of you may have seen in the previous episodes where we saw some modules such as the Red Sidekick. Now, this is a really cool bit of kit because, as we'll see in comparison to Teradek's approach there, firstly, it's much slimmer, much smaller. So when you're working in a very tight environment or size is a concern, having such a slim module can be really beneficial. And also it takes power and does control through the port on the back, where if we now switch back to our DSMC2 here, because we've got the built-in wireless follow focus, we firstly have to have a cable coming out the back to get the control and then to also power the system as well. So before we get onto the wireless follow focus, I'm just going to go through and show some of the menu controls that we get. And fundamentally, because they're using RCP, they can control absolutely everything that you can through a touchscreen or through the Sidekick. So I'm just going to go through very quickly now and just kind of tap through some of them. We can kind of come in, change our frame rate. We can come in, get into anamorphic mode, change our aspect ratio. It gives us also what's quite cool, the actual size of the physical sensor size we're shooting as well. So that's really neat. Obviously our ISO, so if you're on a Gemini, you can still flip into low light mode. Shutter, also we can change our LUT and our highlight roll off really, really quickly in here by coming in very quickly through this nice large screen. So X out of that, and we're now going to come down to the menu button down here as well. This is where we firstly got our full camera menus. So anything we can do, black balancing, frame guides, all that stuff that your AEC can get to very, very quickly. What's also super cool is they've got multiple language support. So they've got Chinese language support built into this module as well. And obviously we can then come in and control our MDR that's built into the camera. Now, as you can see here, I've got one cable coming out the front that's going to my iris and my focus. And both of those, we're getting enough power through that DTAP to control both of them. So I'm just going to connect up my follow focus here. We can see that I'm now controlling that. Just going to prove to you that I am doing that. And then we've got iris control as well. So that's super, super neat. You can see that it's opening and closing there. And we also have run stop control all through the handset as well. Just want to give a brief little shout out to Seb from Holden, who very graciously helped me get hold of this kit, even though we are still in lockdown. So really, really cool bit of kit. And this is something that I've been using more and more just to keep that unit nice and compact. Because again, sometimes when we have to use wireless follow focus systems, we have relatively large boxes we've got to mount somewhere else on the camera. And if we're on a gimbal or a drone, having something so petite and small that can flush right in there and can get us actually 3 units of control to control up to multiple gears if we want to, it's just a really, really flexible system. So for the next bit, I'm going to jump over to another tool that fully utilizes the RCP protocol. So I'm just going to switch the cameras around. So just give me 2 seconds. Right then, so that is now booting up. I'm just going to get a focus on this. So what I have here is the small HD Cine 7 mounted up to a Ranger. Now I wanted to make sure the screen is in full size here so you can kind of see what's going on. Sadly, at this point, I've run out of lenses, so there's no lens mounted on this one. I only had 3 lenses with me, and I've managed to somehow get 4 cameras here. So just while this is booting up, let's get the bottom of the screen turned on. This is another use case, and actually one of the most exciting things that I've kind of see come out for a DSMC2 product, and that's actually having the ability to come in. I'm just going to stop my camera down here and have an alternative method to control the camera. So let's just focus up here. And as we boot up, again, because it's using the control port through the camera, we have to make sure that's connected. We now get full control over the camera directly through this screen. So there's a couple of pros and cons to both systems, first party and third party. The noticeable change here is the amount of cables. So we've got to have an SDI cable. So I'll stop obstructing that. SDI cable at the top. We've got to have a power cable and then also a control cable over here. So for those of you that really want to keep a lightweight system, having the single cable solution from a DSMC2 monitor or the direct mount solution that we saw on the previous camera can be really, really beneficial for you. But if I just go to my menus again, there we go. But for those people that want to have a really nice color reference monitor, there's loads of DPs I know that use their small HD as their color reference and their exposure reference monitor. And be able to have that in all-in-one is super, super cool. I just saw someone say that we could put them in a cable sleeve. Yes, exactly. You can put them in a cable sleeve and keep it really neat and tidy. But fundamentally, from this point, let me just get focused nice and on that. Fundamentally, we can come in and we can make any changes to the camera we want through this really nice UI. So you've got white balance control. We can come in there, do all of that. And also, I'll say that you can even get these with a built-in Teradek as well. So you can even have a monitor doing all of your control and doing wireless video as well. You can come in, all of our codec compression options. We can come in, apply our, if we want to be in P3 or 709. So that's super, super cool. We've also got those full menu controls like we saw with the other bits of kit because they're using the open RCP protocol. All of our settings to go black shading, setting our HDRX should we want to, project settings. What else have we got in here? We can do our playback, format media, create overlays, create presets, basically anything you can do on a normal DSMC2 camera, you can get working here. Is the control cable proprietary to Small HD? No, so Small HD, I'm not sure what control cable they're using, but it's basically just a upgrade pack, so you can either get the Small HD without the red control pack, and once you spec that, you get a little box that screws on the back and a little cable that goes in, and then you plug that basically straight into the camera. Is it hard to change key functions in Cine 7? Okay, so say we want to come in, we want to go settings, we then want to go to setup, we then want to come into keys. We can come in, we can change our sidekick keys should we want to. I then think when we tap them, if we back out of that, sorry. Oh, I went into communication there by accident. Keys, side SSD, and that doesn't seem to be coming up for some reason. Okay, that was working earlier. I apologize about that. As always, when these things go live, things start to be a little bit funny. But you can see everything else in here is working from recording. We can come in, do all of our monitoring. Oh, there we go. That little thing came up. Overlays, look around, monitoring tools. We can select the outputs going to all of those. You want to have what's going with those. And obviously, oh, I actually went into playback there. There we go. And obviously, we've got our camera control, but I haven't got a lens on here. So if there's any little questions about the applications that we're kind of using here, give me a shout now. But then we'll kind of move on to the meat of the session where we're going to really dive in and kind of look at full control. So I'll just wait for a few moments there. I'll just kind of take back to full screen just to see if anything does come in. This is something that I've been using on a lot of jobs quite recently when I want to have a really nice, potentially really high bright screen as well. When I'm working with a DP that you can also load LUTs into should you want to as well, if you don't want to have them in camera. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move on to the next part here, I think. So I'm going to go over to my phone view, and this is where things start to get really, really exciting. So in DSMC2 and Ranger cameras, we have built in wireless connectivity. So we've got a wireless antenna just behind here on the Ranger, and then on DSMC2 cameras, it is built in internally. And this allows developers like Mikkel, the developer of Full Control, to come in and start going absolutely crazy and wild with it and developing his own tools to connect and interface with the camera. And prior to joining Red, I used to own an Epic, I think back in 2014 when this app came out just to work with the Epic. And it was a game changer then. And he's been constantly working and innovating on it to really make this app really powerful for loads of different use cases. Because fundamentally, being able to come in and make changes to our camera, if we're in a gimbal, in a drone, underwater units, or even a situation where it's quite sensitive, maybe we're doing a documentary and having too many people in the room could be a little bit distracting for the person that's being spoken to. So by being able to be somewhere completely detached from the camera and still make changes all through this application can be really, really handy. So I'm just going to kind of go through the app and kind of show off what it can do and how we can do this. So starting from top to bottom, we're just going to work our way down and obviously show off some of the more obvious things and some of the kind of the less known things inside the application as well. So obviously we've got our run stop. So I've got a card in here and I'm actually connected to the camera that we're viewing the menus on. So that's how we're controlling this camera. So we're doing run stop control. We've obviously got all of our resolution controls. All of our settings can be changed fully through here. Compression ratios. Now, some of you will remember in the last episode, we actually came in and built a really powerful preset where we actually restricted the compression ratio so that nobody comes in and messes them up. We can go into our histogram and see that in real time. So I'm coming in. You can see my histogram is reacting in real time remotely. We can come in, toggle all of our exposure tools. We can come in, toggle to log. So this could be really cool if you're a DIT and you're sat with the DP in Video Village and you just got this this device sat next to you. I've got a little phone holder here that I typically had when I'm on set. I put my phone in there. See if I can do this on stream without making a fool of myself. Have the phone in there, have that rigged on my DIT station, and I'm just monitoring the cameras really, really nicely. And one thing that I've just reminded myself is getting this set up. So there's a couple of different ways that we can have the camera communicating. So by coming into the Wi-Fi controls, we've got two modes. We've got infrastructure mode and ad hoc mode. Ad hoc mode is where the camera is creating its own wireless network. And typically, this is great if you're in a situation where there's absolutely zero wireless interference. So I'm at home here, so there's a million wireless connections. So by having an ad hoc mode, because of the strength of the antenna and the strength of everyone else's wireless routers around here, you may run into a little bit of interference and dropouts. So through speaking with Mikkel, he was kind of telling me that infrastructure mode is really the way to be going, where you're connecting to an existing wireless network. And I can already hear people saying, well, what if I'm in the middle of the Amazon rainforest? There's no Wi-Fi out there. Well, what you can do is, for example, on the production module and on Ranger, there's a little USB port, or you can do a DTAP to USB and plug in a very small little wireless router that then you can have all of your cameras connected to. And actually on Dark Crystal, what we did was we had a wireless router connected to the back of the DIT rig, and all of the cameras then connected into that. And this then allows us to connect to multiple cameras individually and adjust them, which is really, really cool. And we'll look at some of the flexibility and features of that in a moment. So a couple of the options. If you're running into issues with the connectivity, jump into infrastructure mode and connect up to a wireless existing network. So carry on moving down. We can see that as I'm using a Canon EF lens here, we've actually got control over the iris. So I'm coming in, I'm adjusting that on the fly really, really easily and near instantaneously as well. You can see our lens information there with where the focus is in imperial or metric. We can see our color, our calibration temperatures. We can come in, do our ISO. If we're on Gemini, we could go into low light mode. White balance as well. And we've got some quick toggles here as well. So we can jump around between the various white balances as well. We can do our tint, all of those really good things. So just go back to daylight. There we go. Near instantaneously again as well. Quick access to all of our tools. So there's a couple of use cases where I've seen AECs have this mounted to the side of their wireless follow focus hand unit, and they can come in and they can toggle on the edge focus or the other focus tools that could be beneficial to them really, really quickly. Moving down, and we're going to skip to the options at the lower half of the screen. So we've got our record settings. Again, really easy and quickly to get into continuous record mode. If you want to come in and do speed ramp, record burst, red code burst, sorry, that James talked about in stills to motion, we can get into that very, very quickly. We've got all of our anamorphic modes, shooting presets, temperatures. We can see which black shade calibration we're using as well. And this is where things, for me personally, which made me really excited about the app back in 2014 when I started using it, is the focus control. Now, I can already hear a couple of AECs going, why do I want to use a phone for my wireless follow focus when I've already got a hand unit? But there is a couple of use cases where, through speaking to Mikkel, that people in small teams, the occasional gimbal work, tabletop, or even underwater control, where they couldn't get these on, if you're on a gimbal and you're really stressing, maybe you're on a lightweight gimbal and it doesn't have got the motors to add on this chunky wireless follow focus unit, by utilizing some EF lenses, you can get control to that really, really reliably. I saw somebody who was using GDU lenses, which there's no external control for iris or focus. So being able to have this crash camera that's enclosed and safe, and you can still come in and control the focus, is really, really neat. And the thing that I initially used this for was actually when we're kind of doing motion control or really fast movements. So obviously I'm kind of pulling focus here. You can see I'm moving the focus around here. I'm just going to come in and reinitialize the lens so my close and far is set correctly. And you'll notice that I've got these triangles all the way along at the top. And what these triangles allow me to do is make focus marks. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to set a focus point onto my small HD. I'm going to mark it with that pink one. And then I'm going to push the focus to the back to my little red rules of engagement book. And I'm then going to set the red marker there. And you'll see down the bottom here, I've then got this thing called rack speed. So I can come in and I can reliably every single time go from point to point at a specific speed. So I'm going to tap and I'm going to go to pink. And we can see we've now racked to that point. Now, obviously, we're limited by the power of the lens, of the motor inside the lens. So you've got to bear that in mind. Obviously, a wireless follow focus is going to be able to rack that considerably quicker than the internal motors on a stills lens from a Nikon or a Canon perspective. But that's really cool that you can basically set these marks. And if you're on something like a Bolt where it's making really rapid movements, you can do tap, 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 and very quickly either set a really nice gradual rack or a really rapid one that potentially you wouldn't even be able to do with your hand potentially. Another cool thing is the ability to come in and create lens discs. So just like you would if I come here and I take off my focus disc, I can come in here and mark up my lens. I can do that internally inside Full Control for every EF lens that I've got. And as I'm going from lens to lens, I just load up that lens calibration profile and I've got them all built in. So here what happens is the camera goes into magnify mode, and as you can see at the top of the screen, it basically says, hey, set a focus chart up and move back through the increments that you want. So just for argument's sake, we're going to come here, major mark, let's say that's 5 feet, add mark, come out, let's say that this was then 4 feet, for example, add that mark, another mark there, 3 feet. There we go. And this could be our lens disc that is really, really cool. So I'm going to come in. I'm now going to do done. I'm going to save my disc. That has now been saved. When we come back out to the main screen, I can then see I've got all of those focus marks built into it. So I haven't got to trust the top of the Canon or Nikon lens that I'm working with. So that's really, really cool. And there's also another option for this in linear focus. Now, and as you can see, I've got my focus marks coming through. And this is a way for those people that potentially haven't quite got their heads around the art of the focus pull with the wheel, because it really is an art. Focus pullers train for years and years to nail that feeling of, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet kind of thing. And what's cool here is you can kind of use it as, they're going further away. And now they're coming closer to me, and you can really rack in with that speed. And on the left and right hand side, so on the right hand side of the screen, I can move it very, very quickly with very small movements. So I'm moving it very, very slowly. I'll do it from this side so you can see very slowly or very gradually. Very, very subtle movements there. So Mikkel's really gone to town with this and really given you so many features with everything that can be done through RCP. If it can do it, he's put it into this app basically. So coming out, let's start to move through the other sides of the things. Slate. Now, this is something that I haven't really seen many people utilizing, and was something that for the longest time, so as somebody who used to work in a digital lab, I was processing rushes, I was looking at camera sheets, script continuity notes, and Obviously, an on-set environment is a pretty crazy place. There's a lot of times where the trainee who's in charge of doing the notes at the end of the day, maybe the second AC's notebook, he's missed a couple of takes and he's just guessing. And in the lab, that can kind of slow things up because I'm looking and going, hey, I've got 10 clips on this mag, but they're only saying there's 4 clips. I've then got to wait for the script continuity notes and kind of cross-reference, and it can kind of slow things up. So one thing that I started to do very recently was I would have this mounted in my DIT suite, or at least near me. And as I'm working through the scenes, I'm just simply putting in, hey, oh yeah, shots being set up, script continuity has told me it's 24A. So I'm coming in and I'm setting the scene, and that's going straight into the metadata. Now, obviously, it's important to work with your lab to make sure that they can extract that and use that efficiently, but it's a really great fail-safe that if you commit to working with it, it can be really useful and save a lot of time and potentially be extracted to be used in your burn-ins, and you can kind of have an automated process. So really cool there, and I think the feature that I really want to try and dive into a bit more going forward. Keys, this is basically like a virtual representation of a sidekick. So you can come in and we can come in here and get full menu control, so you can see that I'm tapping through the app here as I would. I've also got a gesture pad, so just like on an iPhone or something, I can swipe around all the menus if you're in a bit of a pinch and you need to see physical menus changing on the camera. So we'll just back out of that, and we'll now come down to a really cool one, which is the presets. Now, I'm really singing Mikhail's praises here because this is really cool. Obviously, in the last episode, we talked about making presets in camera and moving them through a mini mag from camera to camera. But every now and again, you may be in a situation where you've got 2 or 3 cameras, and all of a sudden the DP or director's like, oh, I really want to have a 4K 115 frames a second shot, or I actually want to shoot in 6K for this because we've brought in a specialty lens and you weren't told, all this kind of stuff. And going and making a preset, taking it out and taking it to every single camera could potentially slow things up. So how the presets work in full control is they're saved in the app, and you can basically then go to every single camera and go boom, preset for all of you. I'm just going to show that process now. So let's say for the sake of this argument, we're shooting full frame on the Monstro and the DP's come in one day and has decided to go, oh, I've got an S35 specialty lens that I really want to use. Can we get this on all 4 cameras I'm shooting in 2 minutes time? Oh, okay, yes. I'm going to go into my resolution. I'm going to go down into 6K because that's S35 on the Monstro, 6K. Let the camera update there. There we go. We're now in 6K. I've now got to save that preset. So I'm going to do a new preset. I'm just going to save my 6K, 25 FPS. I'm going to press save. We should do 6K, S35, create preset. And at that point, I can now connect to any camera that's on my infrastructure network and ping, apply that preset instantly. So I've got a few others here, for example, that I've set up. So I've got a VFX 16:9 that I've already made. So potentially they've gone, oh, Johnny, we're doing all these cameras on VFX and we're actually doing this at 60 FPS. So I can then come in, I've pre-made this preset so I can apply it to all of my cameras instantly. And hopefully in a few moments, you can see we've gone to 8K, we've gone to 60 FPS, and we've actually got a 16:9 frame guide all built into the app. So really cool. We can export them if we want to. We just set up an email account. Obviously, I haven't got that here, and we can have loads of them. So I've been doing some testing. I've got an anamorphic high-speed one, which is super neat. So let's back out of that, and we'll kind of go over to IPP2. Actually, no, what I'll show you quickly, just while we're on the topic of presets, we've also got access to our soft keys. So just like in the last episode of Solitary series, we built these really powerful custom presets. We can still access those if we haven't got access to the camera. So let's say we're doing something in a gimbal, a drone, or potentially in an underwater housing, and we need to go from a high speed to our full frame preset. We can still apply those pre-made presets that are in camera. So I'm just going to apply my 4K 120 preset just here. That preset has now been applied. And actually, while I'm here, I'm just going to quit the app and I'll show you what the boot up process is like. So you can see all my apps there. So going to full control, it's going to scan the network. We'll have all of our cameras show up and we can just choose which one to connect to. And we can see we've gone straight into our 4K 120 mode there as well. So really neat. One thing that I will say actually, if you are in an underwater housing, I know probably some people are thinking, well, how are we going to connect wirelessly? You can actually cable this. So on Mikkel's website, so if you search full color, on the website, there is a guide on how you can set up a cabled solution for this, where it comes out of the camera, out of the phone, basically through a few converters into a gigabit Ethernet and goes straight into the camera, and you can have a completely tethered experience. So no matter where you are, if you're in a helicopter and a shot over, or some like the camera's buried somewhere, you can still get in and control all these features. So Mikkel's kind of thought of everything. Going into IPP2, quite naturally, we've got all of the control over all of our kind of monitor presets for the outputs. Again, another place we can kind of view going between various white balances. We can adjust our ISO and come in and change the LUT very, very quickly. So let's come in and do one of the Phil Holland LUTs. Let's get that one applied, one of my personal favorites at the moment. Output toe map and highlight roll off. So medium contrast should we want to. We can come in and do high contrast. All of these things that we know we can do in a DSMC2 camera normally, but really quickly through this app. Let's back out of there. We'll go into CDL. So this is one that I was kind of thinking in camera grading. Now, when's a situation that I may want to do in-camera grading? Because as a DIT, I'm always doing it externally, or I'm doing it in post-production or something like that. But, you know, if you're a self-shooter or you're working on a very small set and you haven't got a DIT, it's just you and the camera, but potentially there's a practical light that's really annoying you, potentially, and it's really throwing off the scene. And in Video Village, the director's like, oh, what's this light? It's like, oh, sorry, we can't do anything, we can't gel it. And maybe the tint adjustment isn't quite doing it for you. We can actually come in. So very briefly, I'm actually just going to come in and reapply my full frame preset here. Let's just apply my full frame one. There we go. Again, super rapid through the app. Let that do its thing. There we go. Let the camera just get into that mode for me. There we go. Thank you very much. Oh, it's in 60 FPS. That's fine. Anyway, back into CDL. Let's say that, you know, the way this LUT's working, it's making everything go a little bit green, which creatively is fine, but let's say we don't want that. We can come in and just go, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of that out just for this specific shot. And that's being saved to the camera. So when you come into post-production, you can apply that CDL instantly. Maybe we want to reduce the saturation a little bit. So I'm going to come down here on the bottom and just reduce that saturation a little bit, because this could be something that really isn't working for us and it's throwing off my mental note of how the scenes work and the director doesn't like it. It could be a really cool way to kind of work with those files. So I'm just going to reset that to normal. Again, not something you necessarily have to use, but for those people that are in a particular pinch, this can really get you out of a tight space. We've then also got another way of doing that with lift gamma gains. We can come in and make those changes with very fine precision as well. So loads of really cool things you can do, and maybe ways you can kind of consider, how could I integrate this into my pipeline? How could I maybe work with some of these features to make my experience on set a little bit quicker? Obviously, we've got full menu control, as we've reiterated through each bit of hardware and software we've touched on today. We've got our image control. We can come in, settings. Let's see if the keys work in this one. Oh, okay, so there seems to be, oh, there we go. So this is kind of how it should have been working. Fingers crossed, Small HD might bring out an update there. So we can assign what's happening with all of those keys. So we can see we've got the side SSD, the LCD top, and all the things that are added to the camera that we can configure. So you can come in, LCD top, magnify, tools, all those kind of things. So that's super, super neat. Two things to wrap up on. Playback, so we can control the playback from the camera. Now, it won't give you a video feed, but it will pull a still from the R3D as a representation. And there's so many times I've been on set. Oh, that disconnected there. Again, I'm at home. There's loads of Wi-Fi networks around me. Where the poor AC is in charge of playback. There's no video operator, so the DP is shouting to the AC and going, "Can we get playback on that last shot?" So the AC is in there, they're going through it, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's the shot. Oh no, back a bit actually. Oh no, forward a bit." And the poor AC is there trying to play the camera back, and it would just be easier if you as the DP or the DIT, you're in there. Maybe even the director's got hold of this, and they can control the playback and start playing back those files really, really quickly. So again, really, really cool. And just thinking about a way to integrate this potentially into your workflow pipeline. So let's back out of playback there. And you can also set record flags in and out points in there as well. And from that point, I think that's about going to wrap up showing off full control. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier in regards to the camera with the control ports, if we come back out to my menu one to get rid of the phone here. Each DSMC2 camera only has one control port. So I'm just going to spin this camera around, so you can see the port on the back here. I'm sorry, this is not very elegant. So there we go. We can see we've only got one control port here on the back. So this is something to consider when you're setting up something like a small HD, because if you've then got wireless follow focus, that port is then being taken up by this system. So on the Ranger, thankfully, we've got a solution for this, whereby I've got the two 24-volt run-stop ports on the front where I can run them through. So it's just something that I just thought of just then that I forgot to mention that I think would be really beneficial for you guys, just to be aware. There's only one control port in the camera, so if I'm using these different modules and accessories, which ones are taking priority for me? So I'm just going to go back to my kind of full camera here and kind of see if there's any questions from people while I've touched on this. I know Mikkel's been in the chat, so maybe he's been talking through some of the full control bits. So I'll just kind of leave this open to you guys for the moment. I can see James Lucarelli's been doing some lovely Q&A for me there, so perfect. I've heard a couple of people going back to sets soon. Heard a lot of very interesting bits about ways in going back to sets and signing contracts and keeping distances. So it'd be very interesting to see how all of that happens when we can start getting back on film sets. I saw a question from James from a little bit earlier. What cable do you need for a DSMC2 with an RT motion? So I would check with RT motion. I don't want to be Googling live on stream, but RT motion, it'll be very, very clear. Either it'll be saying it's for a DSMC1 or a DSMC2, and you just got to make sure which rear module you have, because as we discussed at the start, if you've got a Schmidt trigger in your base expander, or you've got the other DSMC2 modules, your momentary trigger, so definitely get in contact with them and find out the exact cable that you need. See a bit of a discussion around IPP2. Yep, very true. What's really cool with RED in general, because the cameras are completely raw, and how the image process pipeline works is we're saving all of that data at the point where the light hits the sensor, basically. Every camera we've got can use the latest iteration of the color science in post-production. There's limitations in camera because of processing and those kind of things, but somebody who's owned a RED 1, they can utilize IPP2 in post-production because everything's happening after the fact, which is really, really neat. You can just see one of my mods typing to me now, so just want to make sure I cover as many questions as I can while I'm here. Just going to scroll up through the chat a little bit. Hope everyone's doing well. But I think I'll give a few more seconds for any more questions, and I think I'll wrap this up. Next week, we'll be back with James Lucarelli, who's going to be doing a really cool session on advanced recording modes and time-lapse. So that's going to be a really nice one to kind of round off his sessions on kind of stills photography. But yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So I think I'm going to wrap this up here. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in today. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully everyone's learned a little bit something about the developers and hardware manufacturers that are really taking advantage of this built-in RCP into the camera, because it is really, really cool. And as always, drop us an email at solitaryseries@red.com to let us know anything that you want us to dive into. Subscribe so that you can be notified whenever we go live. But I want everyone, stay safe, stay creative, and I'll see you all hopefully very, very soon.
We are also very fortunate this day and age, as there is so much great camera choices out there in the marketplace. So why did I choose RED? Look, at the end of the day, I need a workhorse, something that won't let me down, and it has to tick as many of my boxes as possible. What I use day to day has to fall into three major categories. Image quality being number one. It has to be easy to use, on set and all the way through the post-production process. Third is size and weight. I've never been emotionally connected to brand names or logos. I've just jumped between cameras my whole working career. Always in search of something that can deliver a better image in the least time possible. So my reason for using RED cameras is purely logical. Speed and performance are the two things that will give me a creative edge. It's as simple as that. For me, image quality is everything. Some say resolution is not important, but for me it is. I shot a lot of 10 by 8 inch film in my photography days, which was probably and still is the ultimate in resolution. Having all that resolution gave me so many options to reframe and resize with no worries about grain, and yes, the lens had to perform as well, or the resolution was wasted. 8K resolution allows me to push in 100, 200% and reframe. It's like having 2 or 3 lenses on the same camera during the same take. The more resolution and deep data there is in the raw container, the more dynamic range I have, meaning the more colour grading choices I have, meaning the less noise there is. It's simple schoolboy math. You can't argue the science, even though people love to try. I realised many years ago back in my film days that lenses dictate the overall look, density, sharpness, contrast, mixed in with distortion and flares and colour aberrations. You can push and pull all you want in the colouring suite, but you're never going to change a lens's optical look or character. So for me, that's where the look comes from. So if you're after a cinematic look, you have to use a lens that gives you that look. The red sensor will capture all the information and more so, but only you ultimately decide on that final look. This is why I collect so many lenses, and I'm always on the lookout for more. They're all artist brushes at the end of the day. There is no such thing as a bad lens. The camera itself is as easy to use as an iPhone. Actually, it's easier. Actually, you can operate the whole bloody camera on an iPhone. But really, it's as easy as this. Turn the camera on. Frame rate adjust. Color temperature adjust. Focus. Press record. It's seriously that simple. There's something in there for everyone's needs. Anyone that says RED cameras are difficult to use obviously haven't used one. It's not rocket science. Overall, RED has made my shooting life so much easier. I'm actually getting quite lazy with exposure and colour settings these days, only because I don't live in a colour-baked world anymore. In my 35mm days, I had to be like spot on with everything, but now I'm in a raw world, meaning I can change all that information later. If I'm in a rush trying to capture a performance or a shot that I could lose any second, or I've completely disregarded the colour temperature and I'm underexposed a couple of stops, all sorts of things can go down. But I don't really worry at all. There is so much latitude in the raw file that I can easily retrieve my desired look. Framing and capturing the perfect shot is more important to me. I do a lot of visual effects work. 3D tracking can be an absolute bastard on noisy shots, and doing chroma key work can be an absolute pain in the ass also, but the 8K resolution makes it so much easier. And honestly, if I couldn't do any of this on a laptop, the deal would be over. But I can. I change my rigs nearly every shoot. One day I'm shooting a feature film, the next one I'm shooting a TV ad, then I may send the camera underwater, then I'm putting it on a tracking arm or in a helicopter or hanging off a drone, and then the next day I'm on some round-the-world junket shooting handheld out of a backpack. I have no idea what my next job is, but I know I can configure my RED camera to adapt to most things I throw at it. Being able to edit, resize, reframe and grade 8K RAW all in real time is an absolute godsend for me, as it gives me so much extra spare time to be more creative. At the end of the day, the camera I choose needs to be a Swiss Army knife. But irrespective of how good my tools may be, content will always be king. But you need great tools to capture great content, and that's why I've chosen RED. Have a great day, everyone.